English speaking podcast with Voiceera, where every word you speak changes your world. There was a moment, quiet, unremarkable to the outside world, when I realized that my greatest enemy in learning English wasn't grammar, wasn't vocabulary, wasn't even fluency. It was something far more personal, something far more persistent. It was fear, and not the dramatic, cinematic kind of fear that leaps out at you. No, this was a subtle, slow-moving, deeply rooted fear that whispered into my ears every time I tried to speak. Fear that told me my accent wasn't right. A fear that insisted my expressions weren't natural. A fear that convinced me that native speakers would judge me the moment I opened my mouth. I lived with this fear for years, until a day came when I decided to confront it. This is the story of how I overcame the fear of speaking English. A story that unfolded gradually through failures, embarrassments, breakthroughs, and tiny triumphs. And I am sharing it with you because fear loses its power the moment it is named. So let's begin. The fear didn't appear dramatically. It grew quietly, like a shadow. It began with my first school presentation in English, when my tongue felt heavy and my thoughts felt frozen. I remember standing in front of the class, holding a piece of paper that trembled more than I did. I tried to speak, but the words tangled themselves. When I finally managed to say something, a few classmates giggled. That giggle didn't end that day. It traveled with me. It echoed in my mind each time I tried to speak English. It became a voice, sharp, intrusive, constant, that said, "You will embarrass yourself. You will mispronounce something. Your English is not good enough." And every time I swallowed my words, that voice became louder. Years later, when someone asked me a question in English, I would feel my heartbeat accelerate. My mind would go blank. My palms would sweat, and I would respond with shortest possible sentence just to get the moment over with. I avoided conversations. I avoided opportunities. I avoided growth. All because of a fear that began with a single giggle. But here's something extraordinary. Even the deepest fears can be rewritten, and mine began to change the day I encountered a strange, almost philosophical idea. The idea that fear of speaking English is actually the fear of being seen. One evening, while watching an interview of a polyglot, I heard him saying something unusual. Fear is not real until we behave as if it is. That sentence struck me in a way I couldn't ignore. Was I performing fear? Was I rehearsing embarrassment? Was I living inside an old memory and letting it dictate my present? I realized something uncomfortable yet liberating. I was not afraid of English. I was afraid of judgment. And judgment exists only if you give it a throne. This realization cracked something open within me. It created space. Space for new possibility, a new identity, a new voice. I decided that evening that I would no longer be the silent version of myself. I would speak English even if I stumbled. I would speak English even if someone laughed. I would speak English even if my accent betrayed my origins. I would speak English anyway. But realization alone wasn't enough. I needed a plan. I needed a method, a gentle, steady, almost scientific dismantling of fear. I didn't begin with speaking to people. At first, I spoke to myself. Late at night, when the world was asleep, I would whisper simple sentences in English. I felt ridiculous at first, but also strangely free. There was no audience, no judgment, no expectations. I remember looking into the mirror and saying, "I'm learning, I'm improving, I'm becoming better." These weren't affirmations, they were reminders. Every night, I gave myself permission to speak imperfectly. That's when I noticed something transformative. The moment I removed external pressure, my English began to sound more natural. My sentences became smoother. My thoughts began to travel in English. Fear thrives in front of an audience, but it suffocates in solitude. This quiet practice was my first breakthrough. The second breakthrough, the courage of micro-speaking. Once I became comfortable speaking to myself, I stepped into the real world, but not dramatically, not with long speeches or bold conversations. I used what I now call micro-speaking moments. These were tiny, almost invisible chances to use English without drawing attention. Ordering food online, asking for directions in English even when it wasn't required, calling customer care and choosing English as the language, speaking 1 or 2 extra sentences at work, reading aloud for 30 seconds every morning. Each micro moment strengthened a muscle and reduced a fear. This stage taught me something crucial. Fear weakens not through grand achievements, but through tiny rebellions. The third breakthrough, redefining my voice. There was a time when I believed that my accent was a disadvantage. But the day I realized that every accent is a map of someone's journey, everything changed. I stopped trying to sound native. I started aiming to sound clear, confident, and authentic. I began underlining stress words in every script I read. Just like this. My voice is becoming stronger. My language is becoming clearer. My communication is becoming natural. Underlining stress words trained my tongue. It trained my breath. It trained my thought patterns. My voice gained rhythm. My speech gained depth. My fear began to dissolve. The fourth breakthrough, embracing mistakes with grace. One day, during a conversation, I mispronounced a word badly. I braced myself for the embarrassment. I had rehearsed for years, but the person simply smiled and corrected it gently. There was no ridicule, no judgment, no humiliation. I realized then that people do not watch us as closely as we imagine. Most people are too busy being concerned about their mistakes. Once I understood this, something magical happened. I began to make mistakes fearlessly, and because of that, I began to improve rapidly. The fifth breakthrough, the public voice moment. The turning point arrived unexpectedly. I was at a gathering where the host spontaneously asked me to share my thoughts on a topic. Normally, I would have escaped or kept it painfully short. But that day, something shifted. I took a breath. I began speaking. And for the first time, I didn't think of mistakes. I thought of meaning. My sentences flowed. My tone was steady. My English felt like an extension of my mind, not a burden on it. When I finished, people nodded. Some even complimented my clarity. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't native, but it was real, and that was enough. The new identity. A person who speaks English with freedom. Overcoming the fear of speaking English didn't happen in one moment. It happened through countless small acts of courage. Today, when I speak English, I feel something I never felt before. Ownership. The language no longer intimidates me. It no longer reminds me of past embarrassment. It no longer stands as a barrier between me and the world. It has become my tool, my bridge, my resource, my ally. And every time I speak, I underline the words that carry power. I speak with clarity. I speak with confidence. I speak with purpose. I speak with freedom. What fear taught me? Fear was not my enemy. It was a mirror, reflecting the part of me that needed to grow. It taught me that vulnerability is not weakness. It taught me that improvement requires exposure. It taught me that language is best learned through courage, not perfection. And it taught me the most important lesson of all. The moment you stop running from fear is the moment it begins running from you. My journey of speaking English is not finished. It is evolving. Every conversation sharpens me. Every mistake redefines me. Every new word expands me. And if you are walking this path too, let me underline one final truth for you. You are not afraid of English. You are afraid of a story you once believed. Rewrite that story, and your voice will rewrite itself. Your journey doesn't begin when you feel confident. It begins when you decide to speak, even while afraid.